Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the August 17th meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Town of Ossining. My name is Sal Carrera, Chairman, and joining me this evening are members of the Zoning Board of Appeals, Town Attorney, Building Inspector, Secretary.
Thank you.
We have
My darling, I love you.
two hearings this evening, and also a discussion with the resolution. I'd like to have members of the board introduce themselves for the record.
Sandy Nelly, Secretary.
David O'Neill,
James Blair, member.
David Krieger, member.
David Whitlinger, member.
Tom, your mic is muted.
Was that everyone?
Tom Wills, alternate. Sorry.
Okay.
Christy Adana, attorney.
John Hamilton, building inspector.
Thank you. I will read the public notice and then request the applicant or the representative to give a brief explanation of the relief sought. Anyone that has a comment should basically give their name and address during the public hearing part of these hearings. The first hearing this evening will be that of Matthew Weiss, notice of a public hearing. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing of the Town of Ossining Zoning Board of Appeals will be held on Monday, August 17, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. This meeting will be held via video conferencing pursuant to Governor's Executive Order 202.1 dated March 12, 2020, and Executive Order 202.15 dated April 9th, 2020, and subsequently extended. Members of the public can join the meeting via computer or mobile app on Zoom using the link below, which is basically https://us02web.zoom. Meeting ID 892-6531-5738. The hearing on this application of Matthew Weiss, 6 Minkle Road, Ossining, New York, in accordance with the code of the Town of Ossining, zoning section 200-21A, bulk regulations, table 200, amendment 2. The applicant is seeking a variance to construct a new deck that will reduce the rear yard from 37.96 feet to 17.46, where 34 are required. Property is located at 6 Minkle Road in the unincorporated area of the Town of Ossining, New York, owned by Matthew and Vivian Weiss, and is identified on the tax map of the Town of Ossining as section 81.17, block 1, lot 42, located in the R21 family residential district. All interested persons are invited to a public hearing on video conference, Zoom, and/or send comments by email to www.buildingdepartment@townofossining.com, or send comments by regular mail to the Town of Ossining Zoning Board of Appeals, Post Office Box 1166, Ossining, New York 10562. Application and site plan prepared by Carl T. Grimm, architect, titled Alteration to the Residence of Mr. and Mrs. Matthew Weiss, 6 Minkle Road, Ossining, New York, dated July 13, 2020, are available for public inspection online at www.townofossining.com, CMS Publications, All Document Zoning Board. By the order of the Zoning Board of Appeals, Sal Carrera, Chairman, dated August 7, 2020. Mr. and Mrs. Weiss, either yourself and/or a representative could give us a little background of what you're looking to do.
You're
You're
mute.
muted. Mr. Weiss, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. We're joined tonight by John Caro. He's our architect. And as the application states, we would like to put in a deck that would come off our dining room. We are in a raised ranch, and that's located on the top floor. And the one neighbor that whose property adjoins ours, with it nearby where the deck would be, wasn't available to join us tonight, but I did reach out to them. So I would ask that if you had any technical questions that I might yield to Mr. Caro, but at this point, I don't know if you need any additional information.
One of the questions I have, how long have you owned the house?
Since 1982,
November of 82.
Okay, thank you.
38 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Members of the zoning board, did everyone take a look at the site?
Yes.
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 Any questions to the applicant?
Were any trees going to be removed in the building of the proposed deck?
No, no trees will be removed in the building.
Okay, thank you.
And the, reaching out to your neighbor, were there any negative comments from your neighbor?
No, I couldn't reach the neighbor. All the years we know them, this is the only time they weren't home for an entire week. And I couldn't directly reach them.
Okay. Sandy, we have any letters or comments from neighbors?
Sal, I have a,
No, we did not get any comments mailed in or emailed in.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members of the board, any questions?
Sal,
Yes.
Jim Blair. For the applicant or Mr. Carroll, one of the considerations or criteria for an area variance is whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance. In this case, the deck, which is being proposed, is being inserted in the rear yard and requiring something on the order of the 50% variance from the required minimum distance. On the other hand, there is a large open space on from the end of the house, which would easily accommodate the proposed deck. And I'm wondering what it is that has precluded the applicant from putting the deck at the end of the house where it would not require a variance.
Well, we certainly gave that consideration. And one of the concerns that we had was that location would put the deck right along Minkle Road. And it's not a question of privacy, but it is a question of convenience to having a deck where we might have to add trees or fences to block off the view from the street. And in the back of the house, we have the opportunity to put in a doorway that would connect the deck into our interior, our dining room and our kitchen. So those two factors were the primary ones that drove us to seek this variance and put it in the location in the back.
The only access to, where we could put a door was off the dining room on basically at the back of the house. That was really
I mean, during my tour of the site, I found, and I understand what the criteria for the area variance is, but the proposed structure as it is situated is the most logical part, and that's why we have the Zoning Board of Appeals to look at conditions like this. But in my personal opinion is that where the deck is anticipated to be built, if approved this evening, is the most beneficial for the residents and for the house looking out.
If I could just ask the applicants again, what is it that precludes the location of the deck at the end of the house if there is for instance, a narrow 6-8 foot connection that would be set up at the back of the house and that would then access the full deck at the end. I'm, I guess I'm wondering what it is, whether it's what it does to the inside of the interior plan, or there's some reason why this would be difficult or inappropriate. Sal, were you given an inside tour? Because I was not.
No, I did not ask for an inside tour. I gave a visual inspection, and the most logical place is where the architect put it, as far as I am concerned.
As far as you're concerned. Okay.
Yep.
Why would it be, I don't need to interrogate you, Sal, because you're obviously entitled to your opinion, but I'm not sure I understand from the applicants why it's the most logical place to put it.
Well, if I could address that, if you consider the flow of the house and you have a deck in the backyard that is in a space that's not conducive for a lot of other uses, then it makes sense to have a deck in the backyard off of a dining room. If you have a deck, regardless of whether there's a narrow walkway to it from the back of the house, and a deck that's located in a side yard, you're really impacting the value of that side yard and its usage today and down the road. When we first moved in, we had an above-ground pool when the kids were young, and over the years, we stopped using it and we took that down. If we had that deck in, it would impact the ability to put in a swing set or a below-ground pool down the road, and that's of concern to us because, well, frankly, we won't be here forever. We won't be the only owners of the house. So we're looking down the road for what's the most useful and effective addition to this house in the sense of adding a deck, and what would make sense for other families who might be interested in moving into this house.
I'm looking at the
If I could follow
Google
that up.
satellite. I'm looking at the Google satellite photo as well. It looks like there's a tree on that corner. Is that true?
Well,
On the corner, yes.
there are trees along Redway and Minkle Road.
No, on the corner of the house.
Oh, there is. It's a catalpa, yes.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the board members?
Well, just for the record, I think it would be helpful if it's not here on the plan, but the neighbor's house is considerably a distance from the property line. Do you know more or less what it is? There's quite a bit of space between your house and your neighbor.
I haven't measured it, but it's equivalent to the distance my house now sits from the property line, which is approximately 34, 37 feet.
Oh,
It
I
looks
think
like
it's,
60 plus feet.
yeah, I think it's upwards to 60. Yeah, I was there today and looked at it. I just want to make a note of that, Sal, that the house is not even anywhere near the minimum 34 feet. It's probably another 16, 20 feet more.
Yes.
Just to note that.
And there are substantive trees in between the two plots.
Yeah, there is. It's a nice row of, I think it's fir, but yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
No, I don't have any questions.
All right, anybody else from the board?
No, not for me either.
Okay. Anybody from the public have any input or comments with regards to this application?
If I may I make a comment? This is John Caro.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Originally, this house was built on a corner lot, so this gives them 2 front yards and basically 2 side yards, if you will. And I know that the front of the house faces Minkle Road and the back of the house faces the rear, what would be considered the rear yard line. But had the house been turned the opposite direction, it would have probably more naturally been, or would have more seem more natural to have the deck at the rear, at the side of the house, or the rear of the house if the house was turned 90 degrees. This also allows them an access to under the deck, where they would lose any sort of space that they might gain under the deck for sitting as well. If they put it on the sideline, since it's elevated, there would be no access under the deck at all. But they are fighting that sort of a two front yard issue here.
Fully understand. Thank you for your input. Are the board members ready to vote on this application?
Sorry, Sal, I just want to make sure
The public comment?
public. Yeah, if
Okay.
anyone from the public wants to comment, you can use the raise your hand feature. And if you're calling in, you can press *9.
Anything, Sandy?
I don't see anybody with their raising their hand.
All right, so I'd like to have a motion to close the public hearing on this.
Motion,
Second?
So moved.
vote,
Okay. All in favor of granting this application with regards to the criteria for the area variance?
Do you just want to briefly go through that criteria?
Sure.
do we need to have the vote to close the hearing?
We already did. We had a vote and a second to close the public hearing.
Everyone voted in favor, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes. Okay. The criteria for an area variance, whether an undesirable change will produce in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to the nearby properties will be created by granting of the area variance. 2, whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. 3, whether the requested area variance is substantial. 4, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. Next is whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. This factor is relevant to the decision, but the fact that the difficulty was self-created does not preclude granting of an area variance. Those in favor of granting this area variance for this applicant, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion.
Aye.
aye,
Al,
Motion.
Sal, I would vote in favor, but would note that of the criteria that you have set out, in my view, the applicant fails on 2 fronts. First of all, that it is, in my view, feasible for the applicant to relocate the deck so that a variance is not required. And second, that the variance as requested is substantial, being over 50%. That being said, the other factors, I believe, are not overwhelming, and therefore I would vote in favor of it.
Then my recommendation, Jim, is to vote against it, because as it stands right now, the majority of the board members are in favor as the applicant has submitted it. So,
I won't. I'll vote in favor of it. I'll vote in favor of it.
okay, thank you. Let the record show that it's unanimous that the applicant has received this area variance, and we wish them the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay. The second hearing this evening. Notice is hereby given that a continuation of the public hearing of the Town of Austin Zoning Board of Appeals will be held on Monday, August 17th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. This meeting will be held via video conferencing pursuant to Governor's Executive Order 202.1 dated March 12th, 2020, and Executive Order 202.15 dated April 9th, 2020, and subsequently extended. Members of the public can join the meeting via computer or mobile app on Zoom using the link below. Again, Zoom meeting ID number 892-6531-5738. The hearing is on the application of Bethany Arts Community, BAC, 40 Somerstown Road, Ossining, New York, in accordance with the Town of Ossining zoning code 200-26A, animals. The applicant seeking a variance to permit beekeeping and the installation of 2 apiaries on the grounds of the property. Currently, beekeeping is not specified in the code of the Town of Ossining. The property is located at 40 Somerstown Road in the unincorporated area of the Town of Ossining, New York, owned by Bethany Arts Community, Inc., and is identified on the tax map of the Town of Ossining as Section 90.10, Block 3, Lot 27, located in R41 Family Residential District. All interested persons are invited to attend the public hearing on video conference, Zoom, or send comments by email to www.buildingdepartment.townofossining.com, or send comments by regular mail to the Town of Ossining Zoning Board of Appeals, Post Office Box 1166, Ossining, New York, 10562. Application plan and additional information related to the application prepared Bethany Arts Community and by ARQ.HT LLC, 100 Executive Boulevard, Suite 204, Ossining, New York. Dated are available for public inspection at www.townofossining.com, CMS Publications, All Documents Zoning Board. By order of the Zoning Board of Appeals, Sal Carrera, Chairman, dated August 7th, 2020. There will be a couple additional comments here with regards to this. We'll have the applicant or their representative give their presentation. Then the board will ask questions. We'll open it up for public input and comments, limited to 3 minutes per person. And then discussion by the board to see what route we will take with regards to a decision this evening. So applicant or their representatives.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Javier Hernandez, architect for the Bethany Arts Center. This has been approved before in front of this board. Bethany Arts Center is a 25-acre piece of property that it has been approved as the Art Center. And as the original part of site plan, we have restoring the orchards and trying to maintain as much nature as possible. And the uses of bees and pollination is an important element in the restoration of the orchard, and not to use pesticides, which we've been, is part of the natural process that Bethany is trying to do. And the apiaries currently is, like the chairman pointed out, is not specified in the, as a use in the Town of Ossining, but however, the Town of Ossining, I believe, is entertaining bringing that as part of their regulations, bringing that into the code book. The location of the apiaries is not visible from the neighbors. It's over 100 feet from distance from the property lines, and the way it's located right now, it seems to be not visible again from the neighbors, and it's an area that will not be detrimental to the neighborhood and actually enhances the neighborhood by bringing natural pollination to the area. I'm not sure if the board had any questions, and there are some board members from Bethany present as well. So if any questions or anything else we can add to this.
Members of the board, I'll let you ask the first questions and then I'll come in.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd just like to, David Lyons, President
Yes.
of the Board for Bethany Arts. I just want to point out and clarify that one of the apiaries is approximately 75 feet off of the property line. it was placed in an area that was previously a playground that was used by the missionaries. So there was already gravel on the ground. Just wanted to make that clear that one of them is about 75 feet off the property line.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. I appreciate it. I'd like to ask a question of our building inspector. John?
Yes.
Hi.
Good morning.
So as it stands right now, we understand it to be that the town of Ossining is considering doing a new ordinance with regards to bees. That is still a ways off. But as it stands right now, under both sections, bees are not allowed currently in the town of Ossining. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I guess my question to our town attorney is how does this board move forward in trying to give any type of variance for something that's not listed as something, already approved and in place? I have to assume, and I hate to assume, but someplace along the line, the town of Ossining, over the next month or 2 or 3, will or will not, approve an ordinance that's basically going to say bees are allowed. But they, I have to again assume, will have certain recommendations and qualifications of how these bees will be allowed in a specific area, whether it's on a number of acres, whether it's 75 or 100 or 200 feet away from a residence, whether it has to be licensed. None of that is in play right now. So I do not know how this board can move forward in making a decision until the town comes up with either allowing or disallowing bees. If they allow bees and the applicant abides by all of the rules and regulations that they put forward, then there's not a problem. If the applicant basically cannot adhere to the new ordinance, then they would come to the ZBA for some type of interpretation or a structure that would allow them 100 feet instead of 200 feet, if that's what the board comes up with. So I really do not know at this juncture whether or not, this board could make a decision on something that's completely, already disallowed and not allowed in the town of Ossining. And whether or not, the applicant is allowed to keep what's currently there, the ZBA is not the enforcement arm of the town. That's the building inspector. And whether or not any violations have been issued to the applicant, I have no idea. But, as far as I am concerned, and I need a legal input on this, is that I think all of these discussions have to be put on the back burner until the town board comes up with a decision on what they expect to do with rules and regulations. We may say yes to something like this, and they may come up and say you got to be 250 feet away from a residence other than 75 or 100. So I can't see how this board could vote on something that's not already there.
So to speak to that, in terms of variances, this board is authorized to issue 2 types of variances. There's an area variance like we saw in the last application, which is from the bulk or dimensional requirements of the code. If use is not permitted in the zoning code, which is the interpretation of the building inspector, based upon the fact that it's not listed in the section that deals with animals, and the code does say that anything that's not expressly permitted is deemed to be prohibited. In that case, the only type of relief that this board can grant is a use variance. And you have to satisfy 4 criteria in order to show your entitlement to a use variance. And those criteria are, I'll just read them off for the benefit of the board of the public. The applicant has to demonstrate an unnecessary hardship by satisfying all of the criteria. It cannot yield a reasonable return if only used for permitted purposes as currently zoned, meaning the applicant must provide dollars and cents proof of an inability to realize a reasonable return under existing permissible uses. The second is the hardship resulted from unique characteristics of the property. The third is the proposed use would not alter the character of the neighborhood. And the fourth is that the alleged hardship is not self-created. So those are the criteria that need to be satisfied in order to be entitled to a use variance. This is a somewhat different situation. So the fact that the town board may be considering adopting legislation that would allow it under some circumstances isn't really a factor before the board. I mean, it's in the record, and it's the town board is they held a work session, I believe in July, to have a preliminary discussion about this. And staff and consultants were asked to prepare a draft local law for the board's consideration to include, as the chair mentioned, certain regulations to kind of control how this use is happening. And so it's not just allowed under any circumstances because of the nature of this type of use. That local law has not been finalized, and a draft has not yet been presented to the town board. So that it's still very early on in the process. Once that happens, the board would likely have other work sessions to discuss it, hold public hearings, and then if they decided to ultimately go forward with adopting this local law, but none of that is in place right now. So there is, I understand from Mr. Hamilton, there is a violation that has been issued, and the applicant was directed to resolve it, or I guess he would be sent to court. I guess John could speak more to that. So this board is in a little bit of a difficult position because of the circumstances and the timing. But as far as what's before this board in terms of relief is a use variance, and that's the standard that the board would have to consider this application. The alternative form of relief that the applicant could seek is to affirmatively go to the town board and make a petition to request that the board move forward with considering this, which hasn't happened yet. And the board has indicated that they were agreeable to moving forward, but there isn't something specific to this application. So if the board wanted, I guess, more information about where the town board is going with this, that's something we could look at. But as far as what's before this board right now is the use variance, and that's the criteria that the applicant would have to satisfy in order to be entitled to that relief, which would basically be the board saying, you are allowed to do something that is not permitted by the code because you satisfy these criteria.
Well, I find it hard, and I'm speaking for myself as chairman though, is that, yeah, I know nothing about bees, and even though one of our board members used to raise them, but I have no idea what guidelines are to be followed and how this board could say yes to this application right now when there are currently no guidelines. And whether it's in the village or in any other municipality throughout Westchester County or Orange or Rockland, is that there's guidelines to follow. How many hives are you allowed to have on a certain piece of property? How many acres of property? How far does it have to be away from residences? Does it have to be handled by somebody that has a license that know what they're doing? This is just like shooting in the wind here with regards to this application. And if the applicant wants to try to use a use variance, which as we know is very, very hard to adapt because you have to abide by each and every one of them, then we're going to have to ask, how did this hardship result in the unique characteristic of the property? And, is this a necessity financially that they need this? And then, this board, and I'm going to ask for the financial statements with regards to, how much you're making on this and whether or not you really need an approval with regards to this because it's a financial, hardship. And, the hardship was created because the bees were put in against all the rules and regulations of town of Ossining. So I understand what you're trying to say, but I think it puts this board into a very precarious position of voting on air because there's no rules and regulations to follow.
And that's the point, that's why it's a use variance.
But he didn't ask for a use variance. He did not come in and ask for a use variance. He came in with 200-26A animals, and bees are not allowed pursuant to that section. It's a little different story when you come in and say, I want a use variance or I want an area variance. That's not in front of us this evening. It is 200-26A animals, and bees are not included. Just like bees are not included in the ordinance, okay, that was originally given to the applicant by John, that bees are not allowed. That's why the board, the town of Ossining, is undertaking this right now, whether or not they want to go do this. And again, until they come up with a decision, I think that this, application is way ahead of time. And again, like I said before, if the board comes up with a local law that allows bees on a piece of property, they will stipulate, at least I hope they will stipulate, if they're getting educated about bees, what's allowed, what type of bees, how far, how many acres of property, and everything else. There's nothing like that in front of us.
Well,
This is not a use variance right now because they did not ask for a use variance. They specifically asked for what we discussed already.
two things, if we can clarify here. One, if we asking for, the application was because we have a use that is not delineated in the code. I thought that was a use variance. But I'm more interested also, Christy, you said there was a alternate way to go and do a petition to the town board that is probably a better way than to be in front of this board.
Well, yeah, right. As the chair mentioned, the use variance standard is a very difficult standard.
I understand.
Because it's allowing something that isn't otherwise permitted in the code. The town board has indicated initial steps, but hasn't moved forward with it yet. So if the applicant went to the town board and made a submission requesting that amendment, and then the board pursued it in furtherance of the petition, then that may be something that the applicant could work with the town on in the interim. But that's not really, unfortunately, the way the law is written. That's not a consideration for this board in looking at whether it satisfies the criteria for a use variance. And I understand, as the chair is saying, that wasn't what was initially submitted to this board, and there wasn't really any sort of analysis of those criteria as part of the application. So, so that's kind of where we sit now. But that is an alternative avenue. It's not to say that the town board has to grant it or pursue it, because it's a legislative act. The town board isn't obligated to undertake any sort of zoning or any sort of legislative amendment, but there has been an indication from the town board that they may go forward with.
Christie, if I might, and John and Sal, with your indulgence, in the application itself, in the first paragraph, it says BC is requesting a use variance. That's 6 lines from the top. And then it says BAC is requesting a temporary variance, which will allow BAC to keep its beehives while the town board considers changes to zoning and until a final decision is made by the town board on this issue. So I would ask the applicant, which is it?
I believe that it will be a temporary variance that we're seeking into the board, into the town board bring this into law. And as per guideline, I believe that, and Mr. Lyons can talk more about that, but I think the guidelines that were used to have this appearance were based on the Village of Ossining code that has a chapter for Bs and PRs. And I think it's also something that the town board is looking into as a base. So hopefully the guidelines that we use for the
I know the
installation.
wishes were horses, but can you define for me someplace in the ordinance where temporary variances are authorized?
There isn't any.
No,
Okay,
We
so
don't give temporary, or we do not give temporary variances.
that's my point, Sal.
And just because the Village of Ossining has authorized it, we're not in the village. We are in the town. When the town gets around to it, then I think we can talk professionally about this application, and maybe we will never have to talk about this if the applicant will be abiding by whatever the town board comes up with. If, like Mr. Lyons just stated, and I appreciate his honesty, is that, one of the heights is 75 feet. What happens if the board comes up and says, you have to be 200 feet? And that's part of what they're working on now. And that's why I come back to saying, if you want to come in front of us for a use variance, then come in front of us for a use variance, and we'll be requesting everything that's a necessity to satisfy for a use variance. And like I said before, that is a very, very difficult variance to get approved because of the criteria.
Sal, can I suggest that we put the matter over for, let's say, 2 months in order to get better guidance from the town board?
Number one is that, I think that's a vote that we take, later on after we get some public input, unless the applicant at this time wants to withdraw and come back, after they get additional information from either the building inspector or from our town attorney on how to move forward, and or wait for the town to come up with their rules and regulations of, what this local law will allow. That's up to the applicant. I can't put words in the applicant's mouth of what they want to go do, but I'm just saying I find it difficult, if not almost impossible, for this board to vote on something that's not allowed in the town of Ossining, and we do not give temporary variances out.
May I say something, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Just to clarify, we use the village's rules and regulations as a starting point, and we most certainly are looking forward to whatever the town comes up with, and will accordingly do exactly what we have to do. It's really a situation of tell us what you want, and we will do our best to complete it. If we can't do it, then we'll have to remove the apiaries. When we first started this process in talking about it, this was part of our previous application that was separated, and the town board had not yet taken up the idea of legislation. That is just a new idea. And so hoping, and I did not know exactly what could and couldn't be done as far as the temporary variance, but I thought that that was a middle ground that we could work with. I most certainly would like to, if our options are to get an opportunity to speak with the attorney as well and get the options that we have, but it sounds to me like I should pull this application and file for a use variance.
Listen, I can't tell you what to do, but I just want to make it clear to you, Mr. Lyons, with regards to if you come back, you basically have a couple of choices. You could pull this application and wait for the town board to come with their new local law for bees. That could take a day, a week, months, I have no idea. I am sure, or I'm hoping, that they get sufficient background knowledge from those that are involved with bees in order to make a new local law and ordinance that works for the healthy safety and well-being of the residents in and around the beehives. So that's number one. So you could pull this and come back and wait, okay? Number two is that we do not, and again, I'll say this for the third time, we do not give temporary variances. And number three, I will read to you again what our town attorney told you. The criteria for a use variance is that you, the applicant, must demonstrate an unnecessary hardship by satisfying all of the following criteria. The property cannot yield a reasonable return if used only for the permitted purposes as currently zoned. Applicant must provide dollars and cents proof of an inability to realize a reasonable return under existing permissible uses. The hardship resulted from unique characteristics of the property. The proposed use will not alter the character of the neighborhood, and the alleged hardship was not self-created. You have to satisfy each and every one of them for a use variance.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, an additional option is to going to the town board and filing an application?
That's if you want something to be permitted that's not currently permitted, one option is the use variance, the other option is petitioning the town board. Yes, those are your two options.
But the question I would have, that I'm sure Mr. Lyons, because I would want to know also, is that petitioning the town board to do what?
To create legislation for...
But they are working on that already.
Well, that was sort of my conundrum, was that when we started this, they hadn't started to work on it. In the meantime, they have started to work on it, and the idea of going and asking for them to change the law was but then it seemed to be redundant, and I would be wasting everyone's time, because yes, in fact, they are already working on this.
Chris, can I just jump in a second? How many meetings has the board had on this, and how far have they progressed on the law?
I have I got an email from Ms. Levenberg. I believe that they were not going to bring it up in the last meeting, which was previously just a short time ago, but that it would be being brought up in September. And then yes, there would have to be a public hearing aspect of it. She was not encouraging of something too quickly, but it also did not sound like it was going to take 6 months. It sounded like it could be in short order before the end of the year.
Yeah, see what it is though, is that there is an open violation on this that we issued. I don't exactly remember if it was the end of June, beginning of July. I don't quite remember, I apologize. That there is a violation on the property, and unless, if you choose to go to the town board, we have to get something from the board telling us to hold that in abeyance, because we don't normally just issue a violation and just let it fly in the wind. There has to be a recourse to it. So I think you would have to talk, or possibly our attorney would have to discuss this, and something has to come from the town board telling me that they're going to do something. Otherwise, there is a violation on this property.
It was a violation or...
Go ahead.
It was a violation or notice to remedy, or it doesn't really make... We had 30 days to do something, which we did. We applied for to be in front of this board. So now,
right. And a notice of
to what Mr. Blair was saying, is there an option to table this for 2 months and see, and we can go to the board and work with both, and then in 2 months we will be back with the use variance if the board doesn't progress? Or
just to clarify that, what you received was the notice of an order to remedy violation, which gave you 30 days to take action, which was to go before the zoning board. If the zoning board is going to hold this in abeyance for 2 months, then I have to, and Christy, again, I have to yield to you, then the zoning board is taking responsibility for this if any problem should arise.
Well, I mean, I think if the function of going before the town board would be to get a more affirmative sense of what direction they're going in. And that might give the applicant and this board some guidance, because they haven't there's been no law that's been drafted. So it's a difficult situation right now with the violation being open. So I wouldn't recommend putting it over for 2 months. I think that's a long time given the circumstances and that the violation is open. But if the board wanted to put it over to give the applicant time to go to the town board and see what the town board had to say about this.
John,
So I'd like to say a few things. I mean, we know that there are many, many beekeepers across the town of Ossining. That's a given. We know that there are beekeeping meetings that are held in the town of Ossining that are encouraging more people to keep bees. So the fact that we're sitting here, yes, we recognize that bees are classified as animals, apparently, in town code, and therefore we're sitting here having a conversation about a violation. But there are plenty of bees being kept in the town, and the town is actually behind, of the 48 municipalities in Westchester, almost all of them, with the exception of the town of Ossining, have passed bee ordinance in order to make it part of the town code. So I think it's highly unlikely that the town is not going to pass bee ordinance code here in the next couple of months. I think that there's a lot of representative code to use from all the municipalities in the area in order for them to very quickly adopt and draft something. It's also very clear that if you were to remove these bees, you're essentially destroying the hives. You're not going to be able to transplant these bees, millions of bees, without destroying this apiary. They're in the middle right now of hunkering down for the winter, storing all their resources to be able to ride through the winter. So I would like to put a motion that we are going to table this, that the town is not going to take action against this apiary until the town has passed new code that either approves or denies the ability to keep bees, but that we table this conversation until which time the town has made a decision. That is my motion.
As long as we understand as part of that motion, the town zoning board is assuming complete and total responsibility for anything that occurs with a violation that's open.
That is my recommendation.
Can I, Sal?
Yes.
I'd like to ask John, in my experience, and I've been on the board for a good many years, there are numerous instances where applications have been held over either for lack of information, for further consideration, all the things that might come to mind that would justify a holdover, a deferral. Are you telling us that in all of those cases, that the board is therefore responsible for any problems that may arise over the holdover in time? And so you're because I've never heard that raised before, and it seems to me that it's shall we say unusual to cast the burden of this decision to hold over onto the board. It's not like we're dealing with wild lions walking around in a neighborhood.
All right, I think I can answer that. This is extremely unusual that the board has decided to do nothing. Each time that you mentioned, the board said, I need a little more information, and everything was moving forward in a positive fashion. The board just said, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to leave it alone and let the town board figure it out at some point in time. Now, you're saying maybe they'll do it next week. From what I understand, and again, Christy, there was one meeting, nothing's been discussed, nothing's been drafted, and this board is saying, well, we'll just leave it. That's why, to me, this is an unusual occurrence, and I want to make sure the board understands that if this is an open violation where people are going, we're just going to leave it alone, that if something happens, is there a chance it could happen? Maybe 1 in a million. I don't know. But if something happens, the building inspector is going to say, the zoning board said to leave it alone.
And John, if you could,
Okay, hold
John,
on a
if you
second.
could, how many,
Hold
John,
on a
if you could,
second.
how many times have people reported that bees have been a nuisance in the town of Austining?
Dave, it's not a question of how many times people report something. It's when people report something for the first time. We have to act on all complaints, Dave. Now, you've made a point that there are bees in the town. You've not mentioned where they are. You've just made that point. If you know there's activity, that's your business. If you come forward to me, I will act on it. But when we get a complaint, we act on it. When there's a violation, we act on it. We don't look the other way. We don't treat one person differently than the other.
I wasn't suggesting that you do.
I'm not saying you are. I'm explaining our position. My position is if there's a violation, I act on it because my duty is the responsibility of protecting the town.
So I understand that. I guess what I was trying to get to, John, is that you're saying that the ZBA would take responsibility, and all I was trying to do was measure that liability. If there's never been a nuisance, if there's never been a case of bees being a nuisance in the town, then I would say that that risk is pretty low.
And as chairman, and I've done this for 35 years, this board, including myself, is not taking any responsibility for self-created hardship on a piece of property. I feel very badly about the millions of bees that are there that may or may not have to be removed, but anything could happen. A child could walk back there unattended, okay, and get 1,000,000 bites and die. And what is John going to do? They're going to come to the Zoning Board of Appeals and say, you did nothing. And I'm saying we are not taking responsibility. We are not taking on the job of the building inspector with regards to violations and what they do or do not do to the applicant. So as of right now, I am saying we are not taking any responsibility. And David, I understand your position. I fully understand your position since you used to raise them. And like John said, if there is a violation and he knows about it, it is acted upon. Two wrongs do not make a right. So at this stage of the game, okay, there is no ordinance in front of us, and the applicant has a couple of choices. There's either take this application and go back to the drawing boards, or come back in 2 weeks for a use variance, or wait and see what happens with regards to the town board and the public hearings. And John, he has to go do whatever he has to go do. And if there is something that can be created with regards to a fine, then that's up to John and the town board, okay, to work on. But this is self-created. This has nothing to do with anything. It's what we, the board, have to work with. And the zoning board, whether it's an animal, a bee, an owl, it's not listed. And until the town of Ossining changes their code, this application basically is, null and void because there's nothing to vote on. They're not allowed to have bees there. Let them go to the town board and tell the town board, tell us what to do. There's nothing we could vote on.
Sal, I would suggest that if the applicant were before us with a use variance, and that there is not enough information that the board currently possesses to rule on that use variance, because there are a great, as you point out correctly, there are a large number of criteria that need to go into granting a use variance if that were the case. I certainly agree that the board should not, under any circumstances, place itself in the crosshairs of responsibility on this for whatever damages might or might not occur. But I do believe that if we had more information in the context of a use variance, at some point down the road, we might be in a position to say yay or nay. And I would assume that the building inspector would view that deferral as just part of the ordinary course of business. Is that correct or not, John?
Just for the record with that, when I received the application, none of that was on there. And I returned it to them and told them that you need to be more specific. And we received this back. So we did make them aware of that, and the 4 criteria are included in the application.
Part of the problem, as I see it, even going for a use
Well, is it
variance,
maybe then up to
is that I have no guidelines to follow with regards to a criteria of what bees, how far away, how many acres of property do you have to have? I mean, we have nothing to work with. So even if you came in for a use variance, and I'd be shocked if they succeeded in satisfying each and every one of them, but then again, you never know, is that I would still say, so give me something to work with. One beehive is 75 feet, another one is 100 or 125 feet away. Maybe it has to be 200 feet. I do not know. And until somebody tells me what the town board is working on, and they need input from educated people when it comes to bees, and I'm the first one to say I know nothing about bees other than them being in every one of my bushes and plants in my backyard, is that the bottom line is that they have to come up with something that works for the town. If they mirror image the village, great. But I don't know what the village is because I haven't looked it up, and I don't live in the village. I live in the town. So at this stage of the game, Mr. Lyons, I think that to keep this alive and active is that I think you should withdraw and come back with, a different way, a different approach to this, and deal with John and the town board on this.
John, I had a question. If we go to the town board now, as I was suggested, we make a petition to the town board or add to the petition to the town board, trying to push this so it is in a faster track. Will that count towards, this trying to remedy this, or?
Yeah, what I would like to see happen, JB, is we get together and figure this out. What I'm thinking is you go to, as Christy said, you put a petition before the town board. If the town board tells me we think this is viable and we're going to look into it and hold off until we make our decision, I'm more than happy to do that. Nobody's trying to punish him. Nobody's trying to take the heat away.
No.
We have to make sure that they follow code. We can't go on opinion. We can't go on feelings. A law is a law is a law. And that's what it is. If I start enforcing ordinances based on my opinion, then we're going to have problems. So I think you and I, if you decide to do something different, we should get together, maybe talk with Christy and see what step we could take to move this forward.
Unless Bethany, Mr. Lyons says otherwise, I think then we probably will opt for that, to withdraw the application and have a meeting with Christy and yourself, John, and put a petition to go in front of the board and try to make sure that the board acts promptly on this new law being into place.
I'd like to just make a point of information. I believe we have a motion on the floor, and that is to John, for the record, how many other beehives have been given your notice of not being compliant? It would be good to have in our record.
We asked that question a couple of weeks ago. I asked John on the record, how many other people have requested to put bees, and there was none other than Bethany Arts. Whether or not, as Dave said, there are numerous people, including himself, that used to raise bees, is that we're not aware of it, and John is not aware of it, and if he was, they would give a citation. But, at this stage of the game, we can't go police every piece of property, within the town of Ossining, and whether or not, bees are going to be allowed on, a minimum of 2 acres or 5 acres or 10 acres. There's no information here.
Now, all I'm asking for is a point of information from John. That's all
Yeah,
I'm asking.
Tom, the first time I found out that there were a lot of beehives was when Dave mentioned it here, because we've never had talk about beehives ever. Dave's the one who told us that there's a lot of beehives in the town. Otherwise, we wouldn't even know it.
Okay, so I hear from you, you have only one citation for a bee problem, bee
A
hives.
violation,
I think that's what I'm hearing.
a violation,
Yes?
not a citation. They're two different things.
Okay, I understand.
Mhm.
Okay.
May I raise something? My name is Margaret and I'm the beekeeper at Bethany. And I just want to point out and speak a little bit for the bees. If you have bees in your backyard currently, you will have a beehive in roughly about a mile around your house. So if you have bees in your bushes, you have a beehive nearby. We eat food. Every third bite that we consume, all of us, is because of the honeybee. Honeybees are not animals, they are insects. And I'm only here to speak for the bees. It takes 500 stings. A bee does not sting unless she really has to and because she dies. It takes 500 stings to kill a child. It takes 1,200 stings to kill a human. This has never happened. Has never happened, and it will never happen. So I just wanted to point that out, that we need to know kind of that honeybees also will go dormant in about 2 months. They will not fly in the winter. I don't see, and I have not heard of anyone ever, getting in trouble with honeybees. These are not killer bees. These are not wasps. These are honeybees, and we need them badly.
Thank you for that little bit of education. It's always appreciated. Knowledge is power, as I always say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very welcome. So David, what do you want to do?
I would like to, as Mr. Hernandez said, meet with Mr. Hamilton and the town lawyer and present a petition to the town board. Hopefully we can expedite matters and they will be helpful in directing Mr. Hamilton.
Okay, Chrissy, do we have to do anything on our end that they're withdrawing their application now until the near future?
Well, technically, this is a public hearing. If you're not going to be voting on their application, you don't have to open it up to the public. But if there's public here who wanted to speak on this, I don't know if you want to. As far as them withdrawing their application, I think you could just do it by motion to say we accept the withdrawal of the application.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the withdrawal of the application.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Show it unanimous that the applicant hopefully will either come back or not have to come back because he meets all the criteria for new beehives in the town of Ossining. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in.
Hold it. JB, are you going to be around tomorrow?
Yes, early in the morning, yes.
All right, you think you could stop at my office around 9:30?
Yes, 9.
Come talk to me about 9:30 tomorrow. Let's see what we can do.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, John.
So we actually have the resolution also from last time
Yes.
for the board to consider. So,
right.
I don't think you need me for that, Christy.
I incorporated your comments, John. So just by way of background, the board was considering an application by the applicant for a special permit and was before the board on 2 prior occasions. At the last meeting, the board closed the public hearing, deliberated, discussed the various proposed uses that were part of the special permit, and took oral votes and directed me to prepare a written resolution based upon those votes. And that has been prepared and circulated to the board for its review in advance of the meeting. So it's just on for the board to consider formal adoption of this resolution and for the board to provide their input and any changes that they may want to make to the resolution. So what I can do is I can share my screen so that everyone can see it, and then that the board can give me their comments as they deem appropriate, and the board can discuss those changes.
No, let's take a look at your screen. In the future, I'd like to have this before a meeting so that we're able to read it and make additional comments.
Well, it was provided to the board last week.
Yeah, I know, but then there were changes made and we just got them.
Yes, there were two changes, and I can bring those to the board's attention. One was with respect to the site plan, and
Right. And did we receive anything with regards to that?
that was actually a question that's for the applicant. The board had requested at the last meeting that the site plan be revised to show the actual dimensions of, as opposed to just the tree line of those areas where the outdoor uses were going to be. And I believe Sandy had reached out about revising that.
Mr. Lyons, can you follow up with your architect if he's still not on with JB?
Yeah, I'm here, and
Okay.
I believe we do have that on the drawings, but I will double check. We do have dimensions provided for the site plan, but it does not, and the one on the record, we can provide it again. That's not an issue. I mean, I cannot,
All right, can you do that tomorrow?
yes. When I go and meet with John, I can bring that and have those dimensions.
Okay, Chrissy, what was the other items that Jim and John questioned with regards to the original resolution?
Well, there was one thing that John brought up is with respect to the approved site plan, if it's determined that the applicant does have to go to the planning board and the planning board makes any changes, that wouldn't invalidate this board's approval. So I just included something so that it's based upon the site plan, except to the extent that it is amended by the planning board as part of any subsequent approval required as a result of this resolution. And then the Sandy also pointed out that the principal structure is pre-existing non-conforming as to height. So I revised the resolution to indicate that.
And where's the language on that? Because I had similar questions with regards to that. Is that I really think it's the purview of the planning board with regards to any environmental or seeker or traffic studies, because the approval we're giving is changing the whole original character of the special permit that we gave a number of years ago. So I'm almost sure that the planning board has to get a copy of this to see what they have to say.
They will. I mean, this will be reviewed by the building department, and it'll be determined whether they have to go back to the planning board.
And that's going to be a John decision?
We'll discuss it with John and Valerie Menastra, the planner.
Okay. The other question I had with regards to the various dates from June 15th to September 15th, camps usually are over by the end of August, no matter what you do, especially since this is for summertime and not after school activities, but for summer camp.
Okay, I just wasn't, I was trying to indicate that it was a summer use.
Yes, but school starts
Or
September
wants to
3rd,
narrow.
4th, 5th, if they ever start, but it's not September 15th.
Okay, so what would the board like to see instead?
I think it should be August 31st.
I would agree with that.
I think Ossining traditionally starts the first day after Labor Day, so.
Yes.
So do you want to use Labor Day as the date? That probably it's fluid with each year.
Oh, it's August 31st. You just said it.
I'm good with August 31st. All in favor of August 31st?
Okay with August 31st.
That's fine.
All in favor of August 31st? Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Dave?
Yeah.
Dave?
Aye.
Okay.
Sorry, it's hard to see when I'm sharing my screen that everyone's
That's okay. Take your
everyone's
time.
voted. So Sal, yes. David O'Neill, yes. Jim,
Yes.
Dave Whitlinger, yes. And David Krieger.
David
Yes.
Krieger?
Yes, my mic was muted, yes.
That's okay, no problem. August 31st, okay with you?
Yes.
Okay, unanimous?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Jim, you had any?
Nope.
Well, Jim, you had some comments. So do you want to go through what your comments were?
They were for you, Christie, and if you don't think that they're worth mentioning now, we'll just assume that I'll go with your take on this.
I think some of them made sense. There were some that I wanted to leave in just because what I was trying to do is make sure that we were still linking this to the not-for-profit philanthropic organization use.
Yes, that is definitely, this is what this is all about. This is not changing any, area, use, anything like that. This has to be with this philanthropic per the original application and a special permit for these uses.
So one of the things that Jim had brought up was in section 2B, which I'm highlighting right now, the camp shall operate only between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, which hours include preparation for the camp in the morning and breakdown in the afternoon. And Jim had suggested removing the breakdown information to give the applicant a little bit more time throughout the course of the day after the children are picked up.
I would, and I stand by that.
Yeah.
But it really is a suggestion. I'm not sure that that the board came down four square one way or the other on it. But breakdown.
Listen, I understand what you're saying. But again, I think we're going head over heels on this. This is still a residential area. This is still summertime. This is still camp. I think 8:30 to 4 p.m. is the right timing.
Including preparation.
Yep, exactly the way it is.
I'm not sure that's the spirit of what we discussed when we last met, because I think the timing on the date of the hours was really trying to tie it to when parents would likely drop off and when parents would likely pick up. And then
but that was with regards to after school activities, not summer camp. Summer camp was a little different.
That was summer camp, Sal, because parents usually work during the day, and so they're dropping their kids off at camp in the morning before they go to work and picking them up after work in the afternoon. And so at least I think the conversation, I remember David O'Neill was part of this conversation as well, that we talked about the hours being such that parents could drop kids off and then get to work, and then they've got to be able to get there after work. So I thought that what we had talked about was that that 8:30 time was the time that camp was starting, and the 4 o'clock time was when camp was ending. But that's not inclusive of time necessary to set up and take down.
But I think the setup and takedown, then there should potentially be hours on that, because you don't want somebody like hammering to put a stage together or something at 7:30 a.m. to get ready for kids showing up at 8:30 or whatever kind of activities.
Certainly.
Get ready to go. What's the difference? Everybody's up in the morning.
Is this section open to the public?
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Should be.
Now, what does the board want to do?
Could I ask Sal if David Lyons could give us a suggestion about how much time he needs to set up and break down the camp days?
It would be great if we could start at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh.
And I can assure you that there would be no hammering of stages. But I'm fine with 8:30. If we could make it a little later, 4:30, just to give those parents the extra few minutes.
I'll agree to this, David, since you're bending over backwards. 8:30 to 4:30, but that's it. This is still a residential area, and this is still camp during the summertime. So I'm okay with 8:30 to 4:30.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Board members?
I'd agree with that.
That's fine.
That's
I'll
fine.
agree. Yes.
Okay. Christie, 8:30 to 4:30.
And another item I raised, Sal, was I don't know why it is that we have to have in our resolution that this operation be providing scholarships as some sort of a standard by which the variance will stand or fall. You know, they
That was part of the philanthropic part from, David, that they gave, numerous conversations with regards to how many they've done. And that fits into the philanthropic, which I think is very, very, very important, other than just a business model here. Because when you do philanthropic and David is paying for it through his donations or fees or wherever he gets his income from, I think it's important that is kept in. I don't think that we have a right to say how many, but we know from what he did, the first couple of years, which was probably like a dozen. So I think a number, that should be kept in with the philanthropic part of his organization.
again, Sal, could we ask for input from the applicant since he's there?
Sure.
As Sal, the Mr. Chairman had explained, this is part of our mission is to, create situations and spaces for, especially for kids underserving. I would prefer not to put a number on it, but I can assure you that there will be, it's for, I'd really, we do have bills to pay. So I'm thinking, can we do like a 15% of applicants type, participants?
There's no number on it. This language was taken.
If you're looking for a number, I can give you a percentage if we could work with that. But I can assure you that anytime you come to look at our records, should you choose, we will gladly show you that several kids, if not many kids, have been scholarship.
How many have you had in the past 2 years?
So can I make, I apologize, Mr. Chairman, but David, do you mind if this is Abby, do you mind if I say something, a suggestion?
Yes, this is our managing director, Abigail.
Thank you. So Christy, I would suggest that instead of it, maybe we should say that the applicant will make scholarships available. And that's really in the spirit of what we're talking about. And I think it gets us out of the circle of the zoning board prescribing precisely the operations and business model of the philanthropic organization. That should be, in my view, that ought to be left to the organization. I think that puts the zoning board in good stead. And at the same time ensures that we're all keeping in the spirit of what we're doing here, which is a nonprofit philanthropic organization.
And in answer to that, okay, since this has always been since day one, philanthropic and not just a business model, is that, David has put on record over the past couple of years how many children from depressed areas receive scholarships, and even a brother or cousin of one of them that you didn't intend to give, but you gave anyway. But correct me if I'm wrong. There were 12 or 15, David.
We had 10 the first year and 11 the second year in our summer camp. With one of our after-school programs, we had 36 out of 40 receive scholarships. I would have to look into some other records about some of the other after-school programs that we had. I don't have those numbers handy. I apologize.
You don't have to apologize. No problem.
And I just want to be clear, I did take this information directly out of the applicant's submission. This didn't just come out of thin air. What the board had discussed was approving what was presented as presented by the applicant, with subject to these certain conditions. And so that's where I got this information. But if it can come out, you can, I as the chair mentioned, I was trying to link it to the use. There is no number. It's just the concept of the way it was presented is that these children from River Fund that are coming because they're being provided with
scholarships
assistance to the extent they need it.
Correct.
I have some comments when you're ready, Christy.
Okay, so is the board okay with the applicant shall make scholarships available to these children? Is that okay? Is that language okay?
Christy, how would you interpret, just as a legal matter, how would you interpret the word "these"? Would that
It's a
refer back to?
it's a subset of the River Fund discussion. So with respect to the children attending the camp from River Fund, the following conditions will apply.
I would try to put some languages as similar to previously awarded over the past 2 years. That doesn't give it a number, doesn't give it a percentage, but as previously, which I think
The applicant shall continue to make scholarships available. How about that?
I think I would leave it like that.
That would be I'd agree with that.
Yep. Yes.
Sounds good to me.
Onward.
Then one of Jim's other comments was for Oktoberfest to give the applicant some flexibility in setting up before. The board had discussed allowing breakdown activities the next day. So to do something comparable and allowing setup in the days prior to the event.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So I'll add that language.
Yes. That's one.
We don't have to do that right now.
Right. 1 day a year.
Right.
Next. Jim, do you have any more?
No, sir.
Thank God. Okay, David.
Sal, I'm not sure I like that, but
That's okay, Jim. You'll get over it tonight. Jim, you had some comments?
I have a few.
Yeah, David.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. If we're going to put Quidditch in, it is a capital Q, but I was kind of questioning whether or not should we. I guess that's actually drawn on the site plan, so that's why we're calling it the Quidditch pitch and not something more general.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how it's identified on the site plan, and that's also the discussion of where the activities are going to be for each use was also taken out of the applicant's submission. So I wanted to make it consistent with the terminology in the site plan and also how the applicant discussed it in their submission.
It was for delineation of the different areas. So
make it that thick in terms of cream cheese and
it would say
salmon on each.
where the
Kind of like
Quidditch
sends it.
be where it is at all times. It won't move.
Yeah, okay. And then in similar fashion, there are other places where we've used proper nouns such as Theater O and Oktoberfest, and I wondered to know if we wanted to be more general. Let's say that 3 years from now they figure out that Oktoberfest is a copyrighted thing and they have to change it to, I don't know, Arts in October or something like that. Do we want to be that specific? Do we want to call it, I don't know, the art event in the fall or something more general and not be using that proper noun? Similar with Theater O, let's say, years down the road that's, some sort of outdoor painting camp or something instead. Do we want to be so prescriptive?
I mean, I think since the special use permit doesn't go for that long, I think to me, it makes sense to keep the specific names of the intended, organizations that are doing these activities, so that there's not confusion if somebody comes in with another name and is doing exactly the same thing, and that it gets revisited in 2 to 3 years on a regular basis anyway.
I agree with that, and all of the applications and all of the determining language and all of the paperwork that has been sent to us has all of these names in it, so I just like to leave it alone without revisiting all of it.
So may I, this is Abby Lewis again. The paperwork specifically said these were examples precisely for the reason just suggested. So
Right.
if for some reason Theater O next, in another year or two is doing something different, and there's another theater program or another arts program, we really don't want, to come back just because there's another name of an organization. So that we tried to be very clear about that in the application. Certainly the guidance about the number of participants and the hours, and that it is philanthropic, for philanthropic purposes, all of that is exactly the same. But I think as Dave suggests, it would be in the spirit of what was asked for in the prior discussions to remove the specific name.
It's still an outdoor children's theater camp, right? Is that concept changing?
Nothing. There's been no change there. So it's as we had asked for outdoor theater program, and that's right. It said Theater O was an example of the program. So I think the way, one suggestion of doing this really quickly might, Christy, just be, for example, Theater O in your parenthetical, which would make it clear to tie to what our submission was, while at the same time also making it clear that the spirit of that submission and what we said is that's an example of, and the current program that we had in mind.
Is that amenable to the board?
That seems to be in alignment with the conversation. Was similar language used for Oktoberfest, or was that also specifically referred to? Or was Oktoberfest used as an example in the application?
No, it's Oktoberfest.
Yeah. It was, but I think, Dave, you raise a valid point. If for some strange reason we discovered there's a copyright infringement, I certainly doubt I hope it's not people's intention that suddenly that would become an unpermitted activity if we had to call it something else. It's probably pretty unlikely, but you raise a valid point.
Chrissy?
So this is how it's kind of categorized. Oktoberfest, an annual interactive artistic experience. So to make it is that better?
Yeah, I think that gives flexibility if something happens, so we're not all.
I understand, and I don't think this board would, if the name changes. I think it's more the concept of the regulations, because that's how it was presented in the application materials, and that's what I was working off of. But I think that's fine if the board is.
I think it's also, I think it's an efficient use of the board's time.
That's all I have.
Any other comments with regards to what Chrissy has drawn up?
No, not for me.
No other comments.
No other comments?
Okay, Chrissy, I guess, do you need a vote on this?
Yeah, and if we do it as a roll call, just so that we're perfectly clear. And then I'll make those changes and we'll get a final version to Sandy and to the applicant.
Yeah. Okay, can we have a roll call on approval of the resolution and language that Chrissy has put forth for BAC?
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I think we got to call us out by name, right?
Yeah. Jim,
Aye.
David O'Neill,
Aye.
David Krieger,
Aye.
Dave Whitley.
Aye.
Sal Carrera, aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Sandy, are you still there? Sandy?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, can you, okay, can you stay on?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you for all your participation.